So I'm going to be introducing the Climate Literacy Resolution and some of the things that our committee has learned over the course of we start with this, and that is that the land where LAUSD has built schools and the waters that we use in them are the unceded lands and waters that the Tongva and Tataviam nations and their fellow native peoples have lived in, observed, tended, shaped, and honored for more than 10,000 years before people of Europe came. Might be 23,000 at this point, we're not sure. Their ancestral knowledge and continued observation of the intricacies of the web of life here, and I think the assertions that their cultures carry on living well, about humanity's place in the universe, will help us live here well and our children live well on through the generations. The Tongva and Tataviam have been working for decades for federal recognition and to reconstitute and reweave their languages and cultures after the brutal processes of removal, enslavement, and erasure that are part of the Los Angeles history. Their efforts deserve our wholehearted support, and links to both tribal websites are in the document that in fact, all the links that I mentioned are going to be in the document that Charlie drops in the chat. Also, there is almost nothing that I am going to say about climate action, teaching, and what needs to change that can't be found more carefully and beautifully said in the 2020 anthology, All We Can Save, which was edited by Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, marine biologist, and by Dr. Catherine K. Wilkinson, who is an author, strategist, and teacher. Welcome. Many of the insights that I had that they have were things that I had inched my way towards by teaching climate change all these years. And you can see, of course, that you will also have these insights. We are here to share, refine, and strengthen them. So welcome. Thank you for being here. Despite how hard the last 3 years is, you're here. That by itself says courage. And now, with respect to climate crisis education, you are the leading edge of a healing tide that's coming in. Why do I say a healing tide? Because schools are going to talk about climate. The Climate Literacy Resolution passed by the LAUSD Board of Education says that you will be transforming our teaching of climate change to meet the scale and urgency of the crises by implementing, infusing, and developing climate change education across all curricula in every grade, PK through 12. Okay, so that giant studies show that a large amount of our youth are anxious, in grief, anger, fear, despondency about their future amidst climate crises. And yet most teachers do not teach climate. Anyone who has experienced trauma knows that the worst part of it is for it to be ignored or minimized. Our first step is going to be to listen. And as we listen and we give students class time and structure to listen to each other, we all heal, no longer alone and helpless. We honor their voices. And then as we teach about climate, we lift their eyes to all the possible ways to help, and they lift ours in return. We become the climate generation together. Everyone can see my PowerPoint here, right?
Yep.
Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so why do I say that it's a rising tide? Well, take a look. Portland Public Schools started in 2016. Oakland followed soon after in 2017, the whole state of New Jersey in 2020, and then the rest of these are California things. Down below it, well, you can see it, is the Santa Clara County Board of Education. That's just school boards. The UCs and the CSUs, the well-connected and experienced 10 strands, climate generation, rethinking schools, and a plethora of national and local organizations are developing climate curricula across all subject matters. Most of it, it's not coordinated, and there's holes and opportunities. Take a look at the document once again that has all of these links. There's a lot of links in there. Educators believe that what we do prepares our youth for the future, helping them think well, share, and communicate well, And then we envision education as a bulwark of truth and training for the responsibilities of democracy. But I think that climate change, being such a demonstration that we're on the wrong track about Earth, has stymied that intention. Education, however, is not alone. Education, educators, education has been doing the same thing for 30 years that our society has been doing. The scope, ferocity, and moral challenges of the climate crisis, the depth of what is needed to avert more destruction, the power of our habits, cultures, and those who profit from the way things are, it's overwhelming. So we want to fix it with our all-powerful technology. We haven't wanted societal lifestyle changes like public transit, certainly not unreachable and dangerous changes in the power structure. So in education for like almost 30 years, 25 years, we kind of slid into the attitude of why teach kids about climate at all? Just install insulation, solar panels, water saving spigots. Do it. Don't just talk. It's not their job to take care of it. And many beautiful projects have resulted from those efforts. At length, we came to see that our efforts are not fast enough. We live in a culture where public education gets short shrift. If it's not making money, it's not getting money. And it turns out that we need to talk about how to restore the public good, the public forum, and the public commons of public schools in order to build the power of public opinion. And our students can and do help with this whenever we ask. Next, we said, okay, we're going to show the monetary value of public education by teaching solutions. Be hopeful. We'll focus our efforts on STEAM and STEM, innovators that can make money while solving climate. I'm using a bad tone of voice, but it's all really good. Our students can help with this, we say, and they have come up with amazing ideas. Then we looked around and we saw the thousands of solutions that we have sitting on the shelf, not deployed. And each year, one student in my class would ask plaintively, but Miss, why aren't we doing all those things? As science teachers, we found climate discussions have been bottled up in academic subjects that are traditionally not supposed to take political, social, or even ethical positions. Climate education is supposed to remain in the realms of acquiring data, not evaluating policy, not rethinking values, and certainly not driving social change. But with decades of mounting frustration and alarm, science teachers have noted that climate policies continually fail to meet the scope and urgency of the crises. Policy depends on our history, law, economics, our cultural ways, social customs, arts, the language we use, our imaginations. Science teachers can't teach all that. It isn't fair to the kids. That's our personal opinions. But our colleagues do have training in all these fields to lead kids in the civic, political, social, psychological, communications, artistic dialogue, investigations, projects, examining and acting upon all the various dimensions of the climate crisis. Thanks to the 2020 anti-racist mobilizations, our committee has learned a lot about climate justice. According to the Black, Indigenous, and other people of color working on climate, you can't have disposable land without disposable people, and the other way around. Our country's history of genocide and enslavement and our way of ignoring history so that we can blame the victims' genes or their cultures has led the dominant cultures to overlook the destruction of land, water, and air, especially where Native and Black people and people of color live, who are our students. If we leave social policy from climate policy, it will fail. You leave in place the destructive excuses for sacrifice zones. Oh well, we're working on climate change now. But unexamined, undebated, unexposed by those who live the reality of those policies, such as our students, we will continue to get climate policy with harms and loopholes. If we leave the same powerful figures in charge with their powerful systems in place, they will always tell us, pat on the head, that's a nice idea. But in the real world of finance, well, we know what the real is. It's 3.85 billion years, it's life, 3.85 billion years old, evolving towards care of the offspring. That's our corner of the world, care of the offspring. So the climate education and the climate movement needs all the centuries of experience and perceptions, planning campaigns for social change that BIPOC and, need I say it, women carry in our movements. Los Angeles has a rich history of this in every corner of the city. And the document has links to many of those organizations, several of those organizations. Now, I want to stop and start looking at the resolution itself. We already looked at the first resolved. The second resolved on outdoor education. Now, this is something I put in after realizing that all of the book I was reading, A Queer History of the United States, was about defending delight. How can we make climate education delightful? I remember the field trips, but it's a whole lot more. How does Earth awareness and the environmental principles and concepts and broader environmental education fit in? That's the big question behind the CO2. What kinds of roles do humans have in this planet's life? We say we have to teach kids to love Earth in order, if we expect them to save it. But we just have to get them out into it. It delights all by itself. And that seems to be the hot ticket this year, the coolest ticket, I should say, this year, is green schoolyards open to the public evenings and weekends. And that's because nature heals. It eases the mind and body, filters out pollutants, and cools the ground. Our students and staff need that. Our communities need these places. Once again, thanks to the anti-racist upsurge and decades of advocacy, the district states that it is prioritizing greening and opening schools in the formerly redlined and still neglected areas of the city. Those are the same places where our students of color are suffering from fossil fuel degraded air. This will work. Trees, shrubs, large vines, and the soil microbes that they feed can clean the air quite a bit and cool it. And their leaves twinkle and flow to our delight. The smell of good soil actually relieves depression better than many antidepressant medicines. What about scale and speed of the screening? We're going to have to work on that. The third resolve gets into implementation. It establishes an overarching task force to coordinate several efforts: the green energy, the buildings and operations, the efforts to expand outdoor education in field trips and camps, the decades of work for gardens and healthy local food, and the efforts that to have schoolyards be ecologically functioning places, along with our climate literacy advocates, and have all those representatives meet together quarterly. Such meetings will be public, broad, and a flexible membership, and places where staff decisions get heard and stakeholders give feedback. With the fourth resolve, we accomplished two things. First, it is understood that there must be working groups for each line of work that I just mentioned, meeting as needed. Second, the Division of Instruction has taken climate literacy to itself. Every effort of every division will be strengthened by coordination with teachers, and climate learning is way, way broader than that. The Division of Instruction will vet and make available many curricula and will provide support for public development, for professional development at levels at and above the school. The fifth resolve is the part that's most concretized. Climate literacy champions are stipended positions now in every school, and it's supposed to be named by y'all are supposed to be named by August the 26th. You don't have to be a climate champion. What I'm saying is that those people who are going to be climate champions should know by August the 26th. Defining the duties of them is an ongoing effort. We see them as a core of lead teachers, mentoring their colleagues and organizing ways that teachers can mentor each other. This year, we haven't got district organized PD yet, but schools have money. So go to your school principals for X time to organize and pay teachers for climate professional development. The sixth resolve requires that the district seek out funding for staff to organize support for the climate literacy champions at the COSA and local district levels, as well as at Beaudry. This is urgent. Climate literacy champions need many chances to collaborate at levels above their school and share best practices for how to put together their own schools teams. Never work alone on climate. Now, the union has put full implementation of this resolution on the bargaining table, which allows labor contract law to be invoked to help require implementation. But in my opinion, the real gain from this approach is deeper discussions that teachers can have about implementation within an organization that was created to benefit us, and discussions with more than teachers. The coalition that brought out so many parents to support the 2019 strike, Reclaim Our Schools Los Angeles, is organizing parent, student, and community support, and the union has brought in some of those people into an 85-person bargaining team. So this is another gain from the bargaining process, is that all stakeholders can hear the reasoning of other stakeholders. In my opinion, the long-term blessing of all of this is that the schools become even more the beating hearts of our communities. And that has to be good for both public climate literacy and local climate action. Imagine if eventually there were broad committees at each school working out a climate literacy and a climate action plan. Imagine our students as the most able, most up-to-date, and most well-trained climate citizens. That's our goal. So what do we need you to do? Teach climate. Start at the school level, start school level Schoology groups to help share. Get X times funds from your school level PD, and support state funding for climate literacy. Any of you who live in District 50, we need Assemblymember Richard Bloom to be told that the climate emergency funds, he's on the state budget committee, we need climate emergency funds to be earmarked for climate literacy. And then if you can speak at the Board of Education meeting on August 30th or have students speak, please let us know. And if you belong to any organization that has interest in supporting the Beyond Recovery platform of the UTLA, then there's a place in that same chat document that we put in there where you and your organization can sign up. So out. Thank you very much. There's 50 million things that I couldn't say. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Lucy. And if you have questions for Lucy, we're going to answer questions at the end of both Dan and Lucy, and put them in the chat.
Okay, I'm not sharing anymore, am
I? Hit escape.
I did.
Oh,
okay, there we go.
Now
Stop share works better. I hit it. I was trained. All right, let's go.
Hello, everybody. As my my screen kind of pops up, maybe Lucy, why don't you let me know when everybody can see that?
Yes. Well, no, I can't see your
It
screen
came and
yet.
went. Now
there
it's
it is.
There we go. Came and went. There we go. I think that might be it. Well, yes, my name is Dan Linehan. I am a member of our climate curriculum committee, and my background is I'm a writer, and I've been a long time educator working with publishing companies on content development. I've done many projects with LAUSD in the past, and though I'm in Monterey, I was fortunate to meet up with Lucy during a climate reality project meeting, and I got on board on this with this committee, and it's been a wonderful experience. And so I'm going to kind of come from a little bit of a different place than Lucy, where she was giving us this great overview of the climate resolution that is now implemented at LAUSD. Now we're going to have this really wonderful deep dive into some aspects of climate literacy with the aquarium, but I'd like to kind of help give some helpful strategies and different approaches for implementing, climate literacy in your classroom, whether you're an art teacher, whether you're in preschool, across the board. And so really this is what this is going to cover. It's going to go, we can't get very deep into much because we don't have much time, but I definitely want to share some important things. So first off, I want to show this photograph here. And the reason why I'm showing this photograph is really one of my favorite ones. And if you look kind of carefully, up here, you can kind of see some kind of interesting features. And for those of you stargazers out there, yeah, that's the Milky Way. But one of the other kind of things that you start to see is this Milky Way over here is blotted out by the smoke. And this is the Sobranus fire that happened in 2016. And I was caught on the other side of these mountains. This is in Big Sur. And I had to get through this on my way back home to Monterey, which is not very many miles from this experience. And so pictures like that are starting to become more and more frequent. And that's a problem. And so it kind of brings a question to mind. Why has so little progress been made in the face of such a catastrophic climate crisis? And the reality is it's not a really science issue. The science for the climate crisis has been understood for decades. The fundamental problem is really one of communication of this understanding. And one of the most important solutions for this is through education. So let's see, we got this. So I ask you, as an educator, is there a moment, an event, or something else that triggered you to feel that, climate change was a very serious problem? How would you describe that? For me, I learned when the Larsen B ice shelf disintegrated in 2002. And I saw this and it was like a light bulb went on my head. I just couldn't understand how something like this could happen. I wasn't that engaged with climate at the time, but something just didn't seem right. So this is 1,255 square miles. It's 6 times larger than the Monterey Bay, and it disintegrated in only 35 days. Now, around this time, Antarctica, this is in Antarctica, Antarctica was increasing at 1.5 degrees average over the last 50 years. That's 5 times faster than the rest of the world. And to me, that was really, really remarkably odd. And that really is what got me here today to kind of talk with you about how we can address these issues and how climate is now impacting us and how we want to try to solve this. So I'd like to maybe kind of talk about a couple fundamentals to keep in mind as you're working through climate change and climate literacy in your classrooms. Now, it's really important to understand that you do not have to teach science in order to be able to teach about climate change, right? The required standards can be wrapped up in climate literacy contexts. So for example, in ELA, if you're doing reading comprehension, read about a climate topic, right? Math, if you're covering statistics or graphs, use climate data, right? If you're doing art, create an art-inspired climate change project. Social studies, now for years, we've got historical and historic events caused by climate change. These are all things you don't have to get into the greenhouse effect or carbon dioxide concentrations to talk about in your classes. And again, it could go all across all subjects and from preschool on to 12. And I'll even talk about some preschool that I actually gave a climate talk to preschool, believe it or not. So another fundamental to keep in mind is, to make the content more relatable to students' immediate lives. Better represent the magnitudes of the climate crisis in meaningful ways. We often hear about fractions of degrees or megatons of carbon. These are all really difficult things for people to kind of comprehend in an actual real world environment. And so it's really good to try to frame these things where students can understand these better. We also want to provide cognitive tools that allow students to better filter information. We know that there's a lot going on out there. We know that there's misinformation. There's just so much to digest. And by giving students the ability to kind of, like a BS detector, it's a really important tool in this case. And just like any type of teaching, we want to hit like the higher cognitive processes, the higher levels. And these often involve not just giving a bunch of facts, details, or factoids. It's really highlighting the interactions and the relationships and the causes and effect. Because when you start doing this is where we really start to see where a student and you kind of fit in this whole giant web of what's happening with this climate crisis. And also don't forget the big picture. It's important to kind of see the big picture and keep that as like a beacon for students on this. Instead of getting all these divergent tracks, keep an eye on the ball, as they would say. And then you want to give students a basic foundation and a point of reference. Again, you know, if you're going to describe something, you know, what's normal? What is that compared to? You know, let students have an anchoring. And this, when you give them an anchoring in their real world, it helps them identify the problem and see that more clearly. And so when we do all this, we can hit climate literacy in all of the different subjects and all of the different grade bands. So now what I want to do is I want to take a couple, I want to look at some scenarios. And I just want to let you know that these are scenarios that are meant to kind of get you to think how you might go about implementing something related to climate literacy in your classroom. And so obviously these are not scenarios that everybody would be able to work with in their class exactly, but they can get you to think about some of these things. So first off would be the integrate personal stories. And I've already showed you guys a little bit how to do that. I've already talked a little bit about, you know, my experience with one of these fires and how I got involved in it. And these personal stories can really be effective ways to kind of break the ice and to transfer to communicate with your students on these. The other really important one is to eliminate misunderstanding and misinformation and misconceptions. Obviously, this is one of the important things that we do all the time as educators. And this is one of my really favorite examples. So this is a scenario I'm going to talk a little bit about. And let's just kind of think of this scenario about our atmosphere. And this is these beautiful photographs from NASA. And this is our Earth and atmosphere. But what people may not, you know, maybe truly understand or really care about is that actually most of our atmosphere is nitrogen, 20% about is oxygen, and there's just 1% of other gases in there. And in that 1%, that's the carbon dioxide, the other greenhouse gases, and everything else, right? And so I'm going to show this little diagram. This is a cross-section of our atmosphere. And I'll throw a whole bunch of technical sounding terms that shows the different layers of the atmosphere, the troposphere, the stratosphere you probably heard about, mesosphere you may not. But if you think about the perspective of us sitting on the ground, 62 miles is the start of space, right? And look at all this atmosphere that's above space. Well, the ozone problem, we're all heard about the hole in the ozone layer, that's in the stratosphere. But most of the air, most of the mass of our atmosphere is only in the first 5 to 9 miles of our atmosphere. 5 to 9 miles, that's where the airliners fly. That's where the weather happens. And that's where the greenhouse effect occurs, 5 to 9 miles. So if I go to the tip of Monterey Bay, the southern tip, and look across, I will see Santa Cruz. That distance right there that you're seeing is 22 miles. So when I look at a map on this, I see this map and I say, all right, there's the good old Monterey Bay Aquarium right here. Here's Santa Cruz, here's 22 miles. Well, if I superimpose the upper and the lower levels of the atmosphere, well, you get to see these little radiuses over here, right? So you've got 9 miles is the maximum and 5 miles is the minimum. So imagine if you could only see 9 miles. That's where our atmosphere essentially ends. Everything that's happening with climate is in this little range. And sometimes the lower limit is 5 miles. Everything that's happening with climate change is in this little range. So within that little range, every day we're putting in 150 million tons of greenhouse gas. That's an awful lot. And people can say, oh, the atmosphere, it's so big. How could this possibly be happening? Well, when you look up in the air, the problem is you see for a very, very, very long way. But most of what's happening is just right in front of us. So that was a very complicated example. Let's just go for a really basic example. This globe here is about the size of a basketball. So what does the atmosphere look like? Well, if you were to take a plastic bag and just wrap it around this globe, that's what our atmosphere looks like. And it's black because we're pumping a lot of carbon into it these days. So this is a very simple example of how I could talk about this in a very easy way compared to some of the more complex ways I just did. So this is another important thing. We've seen atmospheric problems before and we've solved them. You know, I mentioned the hole in the ozone layer, right? we started to identify this problem. And once we put solutions into place, as you can see, it took a little time, but we're starting to get out of it, right? Solutions started and we fixed this atmospheric problem. What about the acid rain problem that used to be really, really bad, right? Dirty emissions that were unregulated or very poorly regulated, mixed with the clouds, caused actual acid to form in the clouds, and it rained acid. This actually happened in the Northeast a tremendous amount. And you could see how the wildlife and the trees and even the structures were getting damaged by this, right? We put solutions into place, solve the problem. Look at an example that's more closer to LA, right? This is an example of the, what we have here is smog in LA, right? So if you look at this chart, I'm sorry again for all the charts, but this is just to kind of get these feelings of the physical processes that are happening around you. So from 1960 to the 2000s, you can see that there's a lot of extra gasoline usage that was happening in LA. And that really had to do to basically more cars, right? We got more cars in LA. That's why we're getting so much usage. But remarkably, look what happened to the smog. The smog dropped incredibly at the same time, right? We've got more cars. How could this possibly be? Well, guess what? We identified a problem and we put solutions in place to restrict emissions in cars. And we were able to get more cars on the street with much less pollution. So we can solve these problems. Another thing I like to point out is, and again, when you talk about, I mentioned these foundational principles before, things obey the laws of nature, right? So when we look at trends, for example, we know that we're burning more fuel, right? This is our trend. As the years are going by, we are burning more fuel. So we obviously, if we burn more fuel, what would we expect to see? We would expect to see more greenhouse gases in the same time frame. We see that, no surprise. Well, we understand that there's some actual processes called the greenhouse effect. And so when we have more of these greenhouse gases in, we know that the temperature should rise. Well, this is what we're seeing. The same type of trend, we're seeing this go up. Now, if our temperature is going up all around the world, would you expect more ice to melt or more ice to freeze? You would expect more ice to melt. So we should see the sea level rise. And this is what the data shows. So it's important that when you look at these individually, it may not get the full picture, but you see how they interrelate. And it's like the temperature is not going up, right? And the ice and the sea level is going down, right? That wouldn't work in the world of nature and physics, right? So it's really important, again, to think about some of those connections. And then watch out for cherry picking data. I showed this. This is a really great little thing for people to see. This shows the last 400,000 years, and this shows the carbon concentration, you know, the greenhouse gas. So if you were to look at this small little box, you would see, oh, wow, over this period of time, we are actually decreasing in carbon dioxide, and you would be absolutely right. This shows a trend of decreasing carbon dioxide. But when we look back at the full picture of the data, we see that there's this up and down. And many of you have heard, well, we really don't have a global warming problem or carbon dioxide problem because it's nature. Nature has these cycles. You know what? And if we only looked at this data, they would have a good point there, right? Because this is truly the cyclical nature. But what I'm showing you here is you don't even see the last bunch of years. So let's expand this data out and see. And you say, okay, at the zero level, which is 1950, you can see that we're going up, but that still could be similar, you know, similar to these other rises. But let's take a look a little bit more. What's the current concentration? So we go to NASA, we can find exactly what that is. This is from 2020, and you can see that it was 415 parts per million. Just in June, it's up to 419. So when we plot this, what do we see? We see a giant jump. So in the last 400,000 years, we've never gone above 300, and now look where we are. And this is that cherry picking data. This is why it's so important to see the bigger picture that I was mentioning to you. So you put these numbers on, you see, wow, this is not natural. This is definitely not natural. So let's just expand the scale even more. When we expand the scale even more, 800,000 years, you see this periodic natural cycle here and how far away we are from anything measurable. It's incredible, right? So for 800,000 years, we've had a difference of 125 parts per million in CO2. For this period of 100 years, we did 30 parts per million. For 70 years here, we're almost or over 100 parts per million, right? And you can see again this idea of looking at trends and being able to diagnose misinformation. Again, very important for when you're at some point in the different grade bands, you'll go into more detail, obviously, than some others would. So really, the atmosphere is thin. We pump in a tremendous amount of pollution into the air every day. We know we can solve problems, right? We know trends obey the laws of physics and nature, and we know that the climate change is not natural, right? We can see the data on that. So other approaches and strategies, right, involve connecting to the students as much as possible. This is another fire that happened just recently for me. So I was zooming down, had to help rescue horses and people and evacuate some friends. Again, something that seems to be a common occurrence to people. But as I'm driving around, I passed Smokey the Bear here, and it's only on moderate fire warning, right? And we've had this giant fire. So this guy on the side of the road, I look at his shirt and he says, the future is on Mars. Well, really, let's kind of try to do something where we hope that the future is not on Mars, right? And try to protect the Earth we have. So again, fire has become this very big problem. I'm going to show you another little interesting thing, a couple things of data. We know that over the years, the temperature has been rising, but what follows this trend is the number of fires. So we're getting more and more large fires that follow the trend of higher temperatures, which is, it seems just pretty obvious. When things are hotter, things catch on fire easier, right? There's no surprise. I got this from Cal Fire, and this thing shows the 20 largest fires ever in California. And you could see that about less than a quarter of them over the 70-year period happened here. Now, this 20-year period from 2000 to 2019, that's a little less than half. But in 2020, a little less than half also, all those fires happened. Something's changing. So I show you that, and now my next point is, well, it can't be all doom and gloom for our students, otherwise people will turn off. It's very important to find that balance. And so I'm going to end with this last thing. So this is a preschool talk that I did, and it was a climate change. And many of you might be sitting and think about how the heck can you possibly talk about climate change to preschoolers? Preschoolers are very, very young, right? Well, you do it by not necessarily talking about climate. You can build the tools, you can build the understanding they need to eventually get there, yes, but you could still work in ways that they understand. So when I gave this talk to this preschool group, I had been to Antarctica, I had studied penguins and climate change. What I did was I showed them lots of funny, silly pictures of penguins, right? This is a penguin chick. And I told them what they did, what they ate, where they lived. You know, this is a rock hopper penguin, and he's jumping off a rock, right? And they loved this. The kids went crazy. So they loved learning about penguins rocketing out of the water, all this great stuff. And so by the time it got to the end of my talk, I'm like, well, you know, obviously I was invited for an Earth Day type of thing. I said, you know, we all like penguins, right? And everybody's like, yeah, we really love penguins. And you're like, you know, we want to protect them, right? If we like them, like, yeah, we got to protect the penguins. Well, that means that we have to watch out for where they live, and we have to watch out for, you know, what they eat. And that was about all we really needed to do to kind of hit some climate literacy in preschool. And they got it, you know, and they got it. So another approach is, again, to create and take advantages of opportunities, such as the one I just did with the preschoolers, so just talking about penguins and making it fun and connecting to something like, you know, a nice fluffy penguin. You know, clarity and keep it simple wherever possible. Sometimes we have to get a little complicated, as you saw from some of my slides. And then the visualizations and the mental maps are really, really critical. Really helps people the visualizations really help people understand this more and more, especially in our visualized world now. And with, using these proper kind of, again, strategies and approaches, we can really, really teach climate, in all the subjects and all the grades across, across our schools. And so with that, yeah, I think, I'm going to close that off, and I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'll kind of talk maybe a little bit more about, let's see, stop share, great. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the rest of the workshop. So this is going to, after I finish this up, we're going to get some Q&A. And then after the hour is over, everybody's welcome to take off. Or if you want to stick around and ask more questions, we'll be happy to stay here. And we have Lucy, me, we have other committee members who could kind of pop in. The aquarium, again, will be giving their presentation on Saturday. That'll be from 9 to 3. Again, that's a mandatory thing if you guys want to get like continuing education credits or the verification letter, that might help with salary points. So that's mandatory. Let's see, and then we have our third session, which is again only an hour, which the idea behind that is, now that you've kind of got some thought about some potential strategies and ways of implementing this in your classroom, you're going to get the training from the aquarium. Well, now you got those things. How can you possibly maybe get that in your classroom? And so that's what the breakout sessions will be on session 3. But I want to again thank everybody very much for participating in this, for signing up. I know it's extra work that you guys are having to do, but you could see how critical and how important this is. We are at such a critical time, right? Just because we have this resolution in place, it does not mean that that there'll be enough of it to implement and get across all our grades, across all our classrooms, right? In a timely need, right? And we really need it to be timely because we don't have years and years anymore. We know that. We just don't. And so how can we get these things? How can we get this thing rolling sooner? And we get it rolling sooner by having the support of people like you, who are dedicated enough to come in and learn about this, and hopefully push your schools and then push it up the chain that we need to do more, we need to do it faster. And so I think with that, Lucy, if you have any other closing remarks before we get to questions, can you please unmute yourself? And
yeah, I want to thank everybody for being here again. And I wanted to clarify that Sunday's session is going to be about climate and climate justice, because the person who's teaching it is a 5th grade teacher, and she teaches climate and climate justice and has brought her entire grade band into teaching it. So she's walking the walk, and she'll be able to help us understand how to do that. She's terrific, very organized. You will enjoy that.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet. So if you have a question, please raise your hand or put it in the chat and we can address it. I'll look for your hand. There's about 4 pages of you here today, so I'll look for your hand if you have a question.
Well, I see someone who just asked where they can see a presentation. What kind of presentation? I think like if you have something that you have in mind, we can certainly point you to the right person. Climate Reality, for example, the organization that is the parent of this committee, they will come into schools and give a small student presentation to people. But if you want something more specific, we certainly have the contacts and the ability to present, and to tailor what you need. So you've got our contact information, just ask and we can get you what you need.
There's, I just wanted to see, I see there's this a question about middle school and, a literature. And yes, there is the place to go for that is Climate Generation. These people had just held their 17th national conference on this, and they've been talking about climate story and putting together English teachers and talking about Cli-Fi for all of those years. And so they have a lot if you want to go and take a look at them. And then the other thing that, let me see, there's a difference between a presentation about climate and a presentation at your school about how to do school-wide climate literacy, right? So a presentation at your school about how to do school-wide climate literacy is basically, it's in the making. We do have I think a 7 or 10 slide presentation on what is climate literacy, and we can do it in a very simple way for, we have one that is very simple for elementary school students, and then we have one that is more complex for teachers. So if you're interested, we will be sending out those things after all of the sessions, after session 3, after Sunday. And then working out is going to take work. All of this is going to take work. It's not going to happen really easily at all. And we need a lot of help to make it happen. So if anybody's interested in joining our committee, our next meeting is not this Saturday, the following Saturday. Hold on, I'll tell you. Okay, going on. Our next meeting of the Climate Curricula Committee is August 13th. All right, what other questions do we have here?
Yeah, there was a couple of questions asking me about PDs associated to the LA River, and I think in general that's a good question, because you know what's happening is as a climate champion starting to form, and we start to figure out what these duties are and what the requirements are. This is where the input from teachers is going to be so critical. We're trying to obviously get material and curricula that's connected locally, for sure. A very, very important for the part of this whole thing is this connecting. And Charlie can talk about the outdoor education. That's going to also be connected to these things. And there's with teaching climate literacy on this, there are so many opportunities to integrate into other aspects, of the curriculum, and so really, I think you as teachers here can help spearhead, how this is going to shape, because we're shaping this right now. Things are being shaped right now with the climate literacy champions and the district.
One of the things that we've been promoting with the district is to take a lot more education outdoors, starting at the school site, and ask kids to think about the natural world outside of and to have Schoology sites that the district promotes that share lessons on how to do that, as well as someone at your campus having a Schoology group that would share how to do all the different subjects. So what we need is training for the champions, the climate champions, on how to make these Schoology groups at their school, and to support the Schoology groups at the district level. There is LAUSD does have an outdoor education department that is expanding quite a bit. They just bought a new campground site. They're trying to get every 4th grader up to the mountains for a week without their family, with their classmates. And they bought a new place called Canyon Creek. They have enough space now to get every student outdoors for that. And I've been promoting, trying to promote 10 times the outdoor education field trips that they have now. And I also haven't, beside the LAUSD website is outdooreducation.org, and I have a website called outdooreducationla.org that cites many places that teachers could take their students to not only learn science, but do art, do PE, do every kind of subject, history, how our city works. Another organization that's been playing a leading role is in statewide curriculum is 10 Strands. And they are developing, right now, they're developing climate justice curriculum but they have developed for every grade level and most subjects, climate curriculum. If you go to the 10 Strands website and look around there, there's really a lot of modified curriculum with lots of resources. So we're hoping Schoology will play a huge role in sharing these resources with everyone, both at the school level and the district level.
So we're really just trying to get your feet wet a little bit here, because what's going to happen is the aquarium, you guys going to have a day with the aquarium, and the content, they will be also going over some curriculum and making some recommendations. And of course, this particular, obviously, since it's the aquarium, it will be geared more towards oceans, right? But in the future, there's nothing to stop any other types of PDs or workshops that connect to the multitudes and multitudes of things connected to the climate literacy, social justice, climate justice. There's just a lot of opportunities. And again, I see this as a really important time at LAUSD where, you guys are at the very beginning of the shaping of what this literacy program is going to look like. And it's going to need the input of you, the teachers.
Definitely. Someone asked about the Ballona wetlands, and I just want to say this, that the Ballona wetlands and the Sepulveda Basin wildlife reserve right there, the little one, those are very, very little, but when you're in them, you realize how important one tiny little postage stamp, on the map of actual ecologically functioning habitat is. And they have so many birds in there. Charlie can tell you all about that. And if we could have more and more of the schools become those little havens, and they're dotted all over the city, then we can begin that dream of beginning to honor and take care of the wildlife in our city. And people are putting in all these wonderful outdoor education things. We're gonna give this chat to everybody at the end, so don't worry about it. You don't have to take pictures of it or anything. we'll send it to you.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that this is a change in the sense that where climate again has always been thought of in ways that it's just a science thing, and even my examples are so science heavy. I apologize for that, but ultimately we are communicating what's happening, and as curriculum gets developed more, these resolutions get put into place, we'll have these more and more ways of communicating climate within these subjects, because I know it's tough if you don't have a standard. We are like standard aligned. Everything has got to be standard aligned, right? And if it's not standard aligned, how can you fit it in? And the idea is that we're not trying to add extra. The idea is, well, how can we work this contextual information in to a standard aligned your standard aligned classrooms, right? So that's an important thing to remember too. So the idea is not to like we're pumping in more information. We're just saying, hey, if you got to do a reading passage, maybe read something about climate. If you got to talk about some kind of policy structure, in social studies, hey, maybe you could do something, that's related to climate. And that's really where the idea is on this. It's not to, again, make it more difficult on the teachers. It's just going to say, hey, this climate crisis is going to impact our students in ways we can't imagine, right? And ways most of us are not going to have to deal with, like, especially, those of us who are getting to the end of our careers, right? And so we need to give them the tools that they need to get through this new world, and hopefully change it before it gets so bad, right? That's a lot of the problems that we face with the social justice, the environmental justice, is that stuff keeps steamrolling, and until we kind of change that equation, things just keep steamrolling, right? And education is one of those ways to kind of equalize.
So I just wanted to say one more thing, unless somebody else, I just wanted to say that if you're an elementary school teacher trying to teach all subjects, and if you're a, history or English teacher or languages teacher or health teacher, whatever, you don't have to know a whole lot and don't have to teach a whole lot of science. More science is better. I'm a science teacher. I believe that, right? But you don't have to know a whole lot of science. You do not have to teach the science. What you have to teach is how humans deal with the situations through art, through literature, through the ways that we organize ourselves in governments, through sociology, our psychology, how it affects our psychology. And none of what you teach should be subsumed into science. So art will not be about making grass pretty. Diane didn't imply this at all. What I'm trying to say is grass, climate art is not, it's not making grass pretty. It's not even designing beautiful memes for climate campaigns. It's all of that and more. And the main thing is that art functions to open ourselves up, our hearts up to new ways of thinking about the future, right? And understanding each other. So nobody's work needs to be subsumed into science. We need you to expand out and focus on this. What went wrong? How did we get in this mess in the first place? And how can we get out of it? What kind of thinking is needed to get out of it? What kind of arts, what kind of policies, what kind of government, is needed to get out of it? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would also just say, when our students graduate, they're going to need jobs, right? And there's two types of jobs. There's going to be jobs that are just continuing to keep the problem going, or there's jobs that are going to be able to solve the problem. And you know what? There are so many, many, many great opportunities out there for green businesses and green jobs, and for places, to get, good work-life balance, good, healthy, all this stuff like that. And this really dovetails with climate literacy, right? And so we could better prepare our students to be competitive in this, because the reality is, China is out there, making all the computer chips, the solar panels now, right? And so, obviously there's a problem, right? We need that industry here. Why can't we get back to having some of that? Why can't we do these things and have to, rely on other countries to be taking the lead on this, right? So there are some amazing opportunities for students, for our new entrepreneurs, for people solving problems. And we can we can give those students in LA the tools they need to be competitive in this new world and just be able to navigate, which is really important.
And we're coming towards the end. Those who have to leave, we've been in an hour, and we are a lot of teachers put a lot of great ideas in the chat. We will put links to what Lucy shared, to this chat and other things on a page associated with the LA Climate Reality Project. I just put it in the chat. And so if you go to the LAUSD section, you'll see the links there that we'll put in resources. So
and we're going to take the document that I made, that Charlie shared in the chat.
right.
We're going to take that and add some of what add what you've put in there into the places that we have in that document, so that you'll have all of that too, as well as the chat. The entire chat's going to be sent to you, so don't worry about that. And there's a recording of this. So
Lucy, I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
Hi. So
Hi.
we have a member here asking about the duties of a climate literacy champion. And I know that you had drafted a rough draft. Are you okay with us sharing that with everyone?
Sure. If you want to, yes, go ahead on and share it.
I am actually not able to.
Let me make
I
it
can
so you
email it
can.
to
No,
people.
I'm going to make it so you can go ahead and share it now.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you emailing it to me?
No, you don't have it?
I have
No,
a copy, but
he's
it's not
talking
able to
about-
be opened.
We'll make sure that's available.
Okay. Wonderful.
Sure that's available.
The duties of the climate literacy
Correct.
champions, right?
Correct. The rough
Yeah.
draft. Yes.
I don't know where I put that, so.
And input would be great. Again, this is one of the things, we know we have got a few climate literacy champions already. We know that so many of you asked for more information. This is not fixed. And, this list of duties is giant, but it doesn't mean you have to do them all. We're still working, this is a process. It'll evolve, and the one thing I want to say is that it's not enough just to have one climate champion. The idea is, we want to build around that one climate champion in the school. They need a team, they need a group, and that's what's going to happen is hopefully we just kind of build this, right? And so it's not just someone on an island in each school that, is going to have to be the climate police. That's not what we want at all. And we certainly hope that we'll be in a position to have climate leaders from other schools interact to support each other, because you know what, you should not have to reinvent everything in every school. It's a large community, build and support each other, and help take the steps to influence what you think needs to be a climate champion, what we think needs to be in a school. So it's a process that we're really hoping we hear from you, and you guys help shape this process.
There's someone that we negotiate with in task force meetings named Allison Towery, who's head of instruction, and other people from the district that we're trying to hone down or talk to them about what all the duties of a climate champion should be. So your input would be helpful. It's ongoing what those duties would be.
Yeah, I want to say something about the duties. And one of the things is that there will be a baseline study organized this coming spring by a researcher at USC for us, on climate literacy. It'll be about teachers. And then probably the following fall one on for the students, because it's really much harder to get student approval to talk to students than it is to talk to teachers. So helping with that, administering and ground truthing that that survey will be part of the spring duties of the climate literacy champion. I just wanted to say also that a climate literacy champion is not the same person as somebody who's a lead teacher teaching climate within a district, within a subject matter. Not necessarily at all. Somebody who, is really, really good in teaching, their subject matter, they might be the best person to train other people in that subject matter, but they may not want to step outside their subject matter and go over to the English teachers and say, well, now what are you doing and how can I help mentor you in teaching it? You see what I'm saying? So we're going to be working with people who are devoted to their subject and making their subject responsive to climate, and with people who are trying to make their schools and their faculty responsive to climate in a broader way, which would be a climate literacy champion, in my opinion. Yay, I didn't know that, Tracy. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like everybody's satisfied for today, and
Wait, we have a question.
Oh, okay.
I do have a question. I'm not sure if there's somebody else that did. Is there infrastructure funding related to this? And I'm asking because I lived in San Luis Obispo for a while, and their middle school has a fabulous, I just posted an overhead photo of it into the chat, has the same kind of solar panels over the rows of parking cars in the parking lot, just like at the VA and in Westwood and a lot of other places now. Is there a way to promote something like that?
Yeah, there's already a resolution that was passed by the Climate Reality Project Los Angeles in 2019 to do exactly that kind of thing, to go to 100% green electrical energy by 2035, and to 100% green energy, in transportation, cooking food and so on by 2040. So
right. It's outside of pedagogy, but if children live on campuses with this and it's just normal, of course, the awnings over our parking spaces are solar, and you drive in there, it's nice and cool under there. It's less hot and stinky, and then we can take power from it. Is there a way to like especially push your campus forward on that, or is that a entirely powers that be?
It at this point it's powers that be, and I will say that the greening efforts that are in the Healthy Green School Public Schools article of the UTLA bargaining has a whole lot of infrastructure stuff in it.
Okay.
It's mostly infrastructure, and then it also has the climate literacy resolution too.
The
So-
good news is that the power of UTLA to bargain for these things to happen quicker and to fund them and put in infrastructure is there. UTLA is very interested in all of these issues. And that helps because, you know, the top people in the district are pushed all different directions from different forces. And, you know, we are amazed how slow they can work. But we are from LAUSD, so we don't, you know, we know it takes time. But so our job is to keep pushing with all the different forces, community forces, parent forces, to get these things done and to get people interested in participating and believing that they can be done and wanting to participate, to make sure they get done in a timely manner that we don't self-destruct. So I think we're making progress.
And this is such a perfect example of making action happen and kind of, you know, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk to get, you know, climate solar panels in our schools like this. Because the thing is, it's a teachable moment too, right? I mean, look what's happening. You actually see it on campus, and how many things you can pull into it. You could talk about the power generation. You could talk about the economics of it. You can talk about so many aspects, so many subjects to be tied into this. And you know what? After they're put in, you know what? At some point in time, they're going to need to be replaced, or they're going to need to be, you know, modified, or there's going to be new technology. And then, again, that's all teachable. Right? You know, there's going to be, you know, why is the power so much this year and it's less this year? Do we have to wash it more? Well, you know, water's a problem. What do we do? How can we clean it? You know, there's just so many ways you could just spin around to integrate this into curriculum.
Yeah.
Go.
Okay, when someone mentioned about solar panels on the school, a large high school has an energy budget of $500,000 a year. A school like Westchester, which had solar panels, cut about a third of that off of their yearly expense for energy. You could have a school project, to go and lobby the LAUSD Board of Education in terms of the economics of solar panels on the schools. Or you could lobby your local assembly person and state senator to provide money to do this, because it saves so much money to have those solar panels up there. So it could be a teachable moment and a project for a school.
Yeah, and also besides saving energy, it also cools. It keeps the tarmac from heating up, and it prevents evaporation of fuel right out of cars. Which happens. It's weird, but it happens.
I like the idea of having plugs at the bottom of the solar panels where I could plug in my electric car.
Yeah. By the way, all of this is in that Beyond Recovery platform. So, you know, the plug-in places and so on. It's all there.
But it would be nice, instead of just a few pilot schools that have a whole program, that just like everybody gets a solar, like introduced to solar in some level. I know some schools already have a enclosed indoor parking, multi-story parking or whatever, big schools, but almost every school's got a hot, dry, you know, sunny, for the most part, parking lot. And it's kind of, this, like at San Luis Obispo, this little middle school, it's almost rural. They've got all of their, well, I posted it in the chat, just a picture I took from it. And I remember the first time I saw it when my mom was in the hospital at the VA. I thought, oh, that looks really weird. It's so futuristic, but that was more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You know.
LAUSD, I hope, will focus getting shade and trees and shade structures like you're talking in, the places, the formerly redlined places. Because if you look at the places that don't have trees, that have blacktop and nothing else, 20% of LAUSD schools have no tree at all. Right? If you look at that and put over top of it, or do an overlay of formerly redlined areas, you can see that there's a match. There's a correlation there, and we can talk about it in history classes and so on, and economics classes, and we can understand that it's more than a correlation; it's a causation, right? So it's true. You can look at any of these subjects and get very deep into many of the connections to other subjects. Thank you so much for everybody.
Any more questions?
Comments? Yes, Eric. Oh, he
Was waving
bye.
goodbye.
Bye.
Well, if there's
All
no
right.
more questions, then I guess we'll all wave goodbye.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.